Well, it's good to be back with you again. I hope your summer was good, and I know this has been a time of big change. I don't know how many times you've moved in your life. I've moved a lot of times, and moving is hard. Let's just be honest about it. It's one of the hardest things in life. But you've moved, and here you are, right? You're here. You're here now, and that's such a wonderful tribute to the spirit, the strength, and the courage of the congregation. Because moving is not easy. Being uprooted is not easy. And while you root yourself here for a little while, there's a larger vision in the future for you in which you root yourself in a new space and a new time. So, congratulations to the congregation. To understand the service today, I want to just start with a story before I read the reading called Confluence. I've been traveling a lot this summer, and I came back, and I think it was on sometime last week, Linda and I finally got a chance to talk with one another about the service for this morning. And in the course of the conversation, I said to her, how is the congregation doing? Because as a minister, you want to know, particularly when you're not here all the time, well, how's it going? And she immediately said, we're coming together. We're coming together. And then we talked a little bit more. And we said, this is Water Communion Sunday. So what about if we focus this on the word, the concept, confluence? And we both said, that's it. So the word for today, some of you maybe get it. I think I get it from the New York Times or something, a word for the day. So the word for today in our gathering, in our worship, is the word confluence. Confluence. That's the word. And if there's anything else you take out today, take this into yourself as a way of understanding not only our connection to each other, but to the larger universe of which we are a part. So the reading for this morning, Confluence. In the beginning, the earth spoke. The wind carried memory through the trees older than empires. Our fiery sun reminded us that transformation is both beautiful and risky. The stones stood, grounded and still, carried the wisdom of time before time. And water, ever flowing, taught that life is movement and change. We honor the sacred flow found in water, the streams that nourish our ancestors, the rains that quenched thirst and longings, the oceans that connected us in ways beyond borders. Water is not just a symbol. It is life itself. It teaches us that what we pour out matters, and what we return to the water must be cared for. Rivers meet in confluences. spaces where different waters flow together. May this gathering be a confluence of purpose, of communal healing, and of our commitment to continue the work of love and liberation. So be it. That reading was put together, and there's just some excerpts in there from a reading that was shared at Standing Rock, where the Native Americans were gathering to protest the water and their sacred land several years ago. Confluence. So what is confluence? Well, the word con is with, right? Fluence, fluid, fluent, flow, with flow. What a wonderful word, with flow. And so often we think of confluence as where rivers might come together to meet with one another, right? Confluence of the rivers, right? But confluence is also a word, is what happens when people come together. There's a confluence of people. And I also think there's another form of confluence, which is confluence that happens when we feel at one with life. It's almost as if there's a confluence of us and that larger reality, that larger universe, that larger web of which we are part, and we feel connected at a level of confluence. We are flowing with that reality. Each of us here has different journeys. Each of us here this morning came from different places. Some of you came from the same household, but maybe different places within that household, I don't know, in order to come here to this place so that you can experience a confluence. A confluence. We know that not everybody here thinks the same way or acts the same way or has clearly the same story and journey. But yet we are all here together. Now I was thinking about what is here is not only what we bring as a congregation, but the place that we're in is Cafe Lena. Now, I don't know the history of Cafe Lena probably as well as some of you might know. But this is a sacred place. This is holy ground. This is holy ground for lots of people. This is a really important place. And aren't you lucky that you, as a congregation, get to meet in a holy space? Now, I don't see any tall steeples here. What you see here, and I'm sure what you may feel here, and I've been here several times, both in the old space and in this new space, to listen to folk music for the most part. I know they have jazz here. I've not been here for jazz yet, but mostly folk music, is that somehow those images, those stories, those gatherings, and all those decades of people coming here, they gathered in a confluence. They came to listen to music. You've come to be with one another in community. A couple of months ago, I don't know if any of you have heard the folk singer Reggie Harris. Boy, is he good. And Reggie Harris is really connected to Unitarian Universalism. His new biography just came out by Beacon Press, which is a fascinating interchange between a folk singer and Unitarian Universalism. But I was at a concert of his probably last year, And right out in the middle of the concert, he said, you know, all I have to say is I love Unitarian Universalist congregations. He said, without them, we folk singers. This was a public. This wasn't at a UU church congregation. This was at the 8th step in Proctor's, at Proctor's. And he said, Unitarian Universalist congregations welcome us as folk singers wherever we go. And so I thought, what a confluence of folk singers, Cafe Lena, and the UU congregation of Saratoga Springs, right here. That's pretty amazing, isn't it? When you think of it, the meaning of this, the coming together, the confluence is, I don't know if you planned it, or whether this is serendipity or both, right? I'm sure somebody planned it, but there's a serendipity here too. There's a synchronicity, right? Between who we are as Unitarian Universalists and this place, this time, and this congregation. Now, one of my favorite places in the area is Peoples State Park, down the river in, I don't know if it's in Waterford, I'm not sure where. Is it in Waterford?
Waterford and Cohoes.
Waterford and Cohoes, right. Well, and one of the reasons I love to go down there is not only do I love the state park and walking around the edges of it, which is a couple miles, and I did it this last week, but I love it because the water flows in an amazing way, and the Mohawk comes around People's Island, and then it comes together, and what does it meet up with but the Hudson? Confluence. So that on the front of your order of service is a picture that I took this last week of the confluence of the Mohawk and the Hudson. Now, there's something about that. I didn't even think about this word, but I've always loved the fact that rivers do meet, and they often go from there, if they're still flowing, to the sea, right? And eventually, the Hudson empties out into the ocean. But the confluence of these two rivers. But if you'll notice on the picture, the confluence, I believe, is somewhere out more in the middle where the two rivers meet. And if, in fact, that's where the energy is, that's where the movement is. But if you come closer in, there's a stagnation. And right next to the shore, there's algae that's growing. There's stagnation going. It's part of life. But yet, I don't think that's really where the confluence is. That's where water is, but that's not where the confluence is. So one of the things about water is it spirals. When it's alive, it's always spiraling. It's always spiraling. It's always moving. And when it doesn't move, it stagnates. And when it stagnates, then other things grow which are necessary to life. I'm not trying to put down algae. I don't want to get in trouble with the biologist in our midst or anyone else, but yet there's something about flow that's critical to life. So feel the flow of life. Feel it in you. Feel it amongst you. Feel it in the universe. Feel it when the rivers come together. Feel it when the sky opens up. And when the sun it comes up in the morning or the sun comes down at night, wherever, to feel that flow, particularly the flow of water. Now, some of you know that I live on top of a warehouse now in Troy, right on the river. And they built this nice little place up there for me, I think. It's been there a little while, but I happen to be the person on top of the warehouse now. And I look west onto the Hudson River. So each morning when I'm there, I sit in a chair because all of the glass in the apartment is overlooking the river. And I sit there and I look at the river. Now when I got this place, I said, "What? Hey," I told my friends, "I'm going to live on the Hudson River." And I get there and I find out it's not a river. It's an estuary. And I didn't know that before I got into this place. I said, "Well, isn't this great?" Because one morning the water was going this way, and then the next thing I looked out, the water was going this way. I said, "Which way does this river run?" It runs both ways because it's an estuary. And so I sit there, and for, I'm a minister, so, as a minister you make meaning out of everything, right? So you sit there and you go, "Oh my gosh," and you go, "Oh, I'm over here working away," and all of a sudden, morning, the tide's going up. The tide sometimes is in between, and I like these in between times. Just like the congregation here is in between tides, right? And then I like it when it's low, because when it's low, it opens up sandbars for birds to come in. So the other morning, I'm sitting there, and what flies right by is an eagle, right in front of my window. And I said, "All right, now, let's just hold on here, because there is one eagle in the neighborhood, but I don't see him flying, he or she, flying by that often." The other couple months ago, I was talking to a person, and I said, I sit in front of this window, and I watch the tides go up, I watch the tides go down, I pay attention to the in-between time. Isn't that how life is? And he said to me, "How deep is the river?" I said, "I don't have any idea." He said, "You might want to think about that. How deep is the river?" Which means, what he was telling me, "Tom, you see something, but there's more to life than what you see. You hear something, but there's more to life than what you hear." In other words, let your imagination and your spirit open up to the depth as well as the breadth of life. The vertical and the horizontal is needed in order to have a full life. So when I was thinking about spiritual confluence, I was saying to myself, well, yeah, I've got confluence of these tides going, but there's another dimension, which is that larger dimension of which we are a part of as human beings. The depth of the river, the spiritual confluence. So yesterday I finished writing my sermon. I go outside into the parking lot, which is right on the Hudson River, and there's Yvette, who's the custodian for the building. Yvette and I have become quite good friends. And so I said, "Yvette," because she was trying to keep people from the farmer's market parking in our parking lot. That's why she was there. But I said, "Yvette, I just finished writing a sermon on confluence." And I said, it's in nature, it's in community, and there's a spiritual confluence. And she said, "Oh yeah, I know about spiritual confluence. That's Jesus." Just like that. I said, I hear you. But then it began to cause me to think about the fact that our spiritual confluence, for most of us, it doesn't mean that Jesus can't be part of our spiritual confluence, but for us as Unitarian Universalists, because we approach religion in different ways, and we have our particular way of being, therefore we create a community filled with principles and values and stories and rituals like the water communion or when we did the flower communion, these rituals, these patterns, these ways of being that are open to the exploration into the truth. That's our particular way of being, and without that particularity, we would not be here this morning. We wouldn't gather. So when we're talking about spiritual confluence, there has to be some particularity to it. Otherwise, people aren't going to come together. You wouldn't be here if there wasn't a particular way of being, which is called Unitarian Universalist. You'd be somewhere else this morning. And then I began to think about this river called Unitarianism, which goes back to the 1500s. Or this river universalism that goes back to the 1700s. And the fact that they came together in 1961, there was a confluence of Unitarians and Universalism in 1961 that came together in order to form the river that we're on right now, which we call Unitarian Universalism. So there's this confluence, right? This particularity in which we then discover what we can discover about what is deep inside of us and what connects us. And then here's the kind of the last thought that I began to think about around this. First of all, this was so much fun. I've never thought of the word confluence before very much, and so this is just what I've been able to come up with in the last week, just by, if you focus in on one word for a long time, it's amazing what happens. You know, you begin to see connections in ways, but if you take the elements of earth, air, fire, and water, have I got them? Yeah. I am wondering if you were to ask the question of which of these four elements symbolically, or maybe metaphorically, most represents Unitarian Universalism, might it not be water? I love fire. I love earth. I'm glad for the air. But might it be that the metaphor, the image that makes us who we are using these various elements, it might be water. Because water is visible, but it moves, right? It's fluid. And the number of UUs I know who believe in spirals is quite high. When they draw in spirals often. They do circles, but then after a while they say, well, you know, circles, it's kind of closed here. I think spiral is more, and that's how water moves. It moves in a spiral. So think about that. I might be wrong, but I'd be interested in your thoughts on that. I don't think it's an either or, but I began to say which of these elements, and might water be the element that most reflects us. So I know that that some of you brought water. Now let's see. Where Linda? Where's? Oh, here, Linda. And folks have. Some people have. We have water from places maybe far away. We have maybe some water from places that are. Help me out here. Where's the water? Tell me where some of the waters are from. Some waters are from where?
Lincoln Pond.
What's that?
Lincoln Pond and the other around there.
Lincoln Pond. Others?
Blue Lake.
Lake Chargate.
Lake Chargate?
Shakagate.
Shakagate.
Blue Mountain Lake.
Blue Mountain Lake. Right.
624 North Broadway.
624 North Broadway. We actually wanted to bring water from that building, which, Linda, did you go over and get the water?
Yes.
You got the water and you brought it here, so we had it here, and we brought that water from that building to this ceremony here this morning. Yeah, and so water came from different places, including the water from your old building. And so what we want to do here in just a minute, after we sing together Holy Water, which will be here in just a minute, where we're going to want us to be able to put those the water in the vessels that are in the center of the room. But let's now, Carol, and you're going to help us out here with this next movement, right? Holy Waters.